out in 1957. And they asked the students, when I think of a scientist, I think of. And so to get us going today, I'm going to send you out into breakout rooms. I want you guys to spend a few minutes introducing yourself, include where you're from, your professional role, and your interest in today's topic. There will be about 3 or 4 people in your breakout room, so everybody has a minute to share their kind of context. And then I have a slide deck that's linked here. And so each breakout room will have a slide that's labeled breakout room 1, breakout room 2, et cetera, et cetera. So what I want you to do, your homework, is to think about this prompt. When students were asked in 1957, when I think of a scientist I think of, I want you to take your best guess on how you think those students replied. And then think about if you asked your students today to respond to the same prompt, how would their responses compare to the 1957 students? Maybe a little bit of an explanation for that response. And then pick one individual from your room to share out to the larger group, and we'll come back and have a bit of a debrief before we kick off into the next phase of our session. So I think Anthony has breakout rooms ready. So we'll send you out.
I will open them now.
Okay. Okay, and it looks like people are being able to access the slides, so we'll see.
It's a good time of year to do this. Everybody's so used to Zoom now.
For better or worse, huh?
Well,
So the results of the survey here, people are very familiar with the idea of growth mindset and the achievement gap, pretty familiar with classroom climate, less familiar with things like marginalized identity, stereotype threat, inclusive pedagogies. And that's exactly where we're going.
excellent,
So
well played.
Just had to get the data to confirm what I thought I knew about my audience.
You want me to give them any warning before closing the rooms? Or?
Yeah, so I was going to use this slide to, let's see if I can send them breakout rooms. Oh, I've been assigned to a breakout room. So I wonder if you could send them a message with the link to here's their breakout room slideshow, and just telling them they can put their responses in those slides. I don't know if they noticed that there was the link to the breakout room slide deck there. Hi, Jason.
Hey, how are you?
I am well. Are you just joining us? Do we need to send you out to a breakout room, or did you get kicked out, or?
No, I'm just joining you. So I'm sorry, I was at another meeting, and so I will listen in if that's okay.
Yeah, not a problem. So I'll give you a couple of things here. I have a pre-survey just to get a little bit more information about participants. So I will put a link to the survey in the chat. So you should see that. And then we have a slideshow that we're using just as a guide for our conversation today. And I'm encouraging all the participants to really make this participatory and raise your hand, ask questions. Let's take this where it's most useful for participants. And the first thing that we're talking about is student perceptions of who STEM professionals are. And so we've sent folks out into breakout rooms. And if you, let's see, we will have Anthony send you out into breakout rooms, and each breakout room has a numbered slide here. It's linked in that main slide deck, but I'm going to give you the inner slide deck here too. So we'll send you out to breakout room to take notes on what high school students think of who does science. So Anthony, I'll let you send Jason out. I think Lou might be also.
I gotta hit a restroom first because I just got out of a 2-hour meeting and now I'm popped into another meeting. So, you know, when I pop into there, you can throw me into one. Which is into a breakout room, which is fine, but I probably won't participate until I get done with all the other things I need to get done.
Yeah, the things technology can't do for us, huh?
Right, right. Although I can do a lot of meetings.
Okay, see ya. Hi, Lou, same questions to you. Are you just joining us? Do you need us to give you the rundown?
Nope, I think I'm good. Is everybody in breakout rooms already, or am I late? I know I'm late, so sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Yep, we're just getting going. So in your chat window, do you see the links that I was just putting in? There's a form for you to fill out just to give me some information about where you are coming into this session, and I can link that again.
Yep, I opened both the
okay.
The links you sent to me. Thank you.
Great. So then Anthony will send you out to a breakout room and you can help them jockey that slide in your slide deck.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Hi, Becky. Welcome. All right. So let me check their slides, breakout rooms. I don't see anybody typing in their slides. Maybe they're all doing introductions still. Hi, Becky, welcome. Becky, do you need us to send you back to a breakout room, or was your breakout room finished with their prompts? What can we do for you?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, Becky Demmer, send me back. Okay, so. Hi, Katrina, are you just joining us?
No, I was in and then I just got kicked out. So you can send me to my breakout room if you'd like.
Okay,
which room were you in? Do you...
Number 3.
Okay, I'm not sure how you got out of it, but we'll...
Katrina, do you guys have the link to the slide deck where we want you to be putting your responses?
Yes, that did stay open for me, but Zoom just shut down. So
okay, cool.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, there we go. People are opening up. I guess teachers just like to talk to each other.
I don't know, maybe I'm not sure what happened. Maybe I should go into a room.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. I can see how they're doing. I'm gonna go join file. Hi, Megan, welcome. Are you just joining us?
No, I'm trying to figure out how to get to the slides.
Oh, sure
so
thing.
I left the group to try to come here to figure that out.
Sure thing. So the breakout room slides, I'm just going to copy in the chat here. And then if you open it up in a tab, you should be able to share that with your group members. I think we're just going to take another minute in the breakout room. So if you guys want to jot some notes, we'll call you back.
Is Megan in?
Oh, Megan, which breakout room would you like to be returned to? Anthony, why don't you give them a 1 minute heads up and then we'll pull them back.
Okay.
Hi, Brad. Oh, Brad's gone. All righty, and then I don't know if you have the timer set on breakout rooms. When you close them, it takes about however long you've got it set for, a minute, 30 seconds, 10 seconds to pull them back, but
Okay.
you can pull them back.
All right.
Yeah, we'll move forward here.
All right. Oh, okay. So now it gives them a minute after you hit the button. I didn't.
And you can adjust that time.
Okay. Well, people are coming right back. So. Welcome
Yeah,
back,
I think
everybody.
people had time. Anthony, how many people did we end up sending out to breakout rooms? How many are we waiting for?
Breakout room 2 must still be hard at it. So we've got 4 in breakout room 2, 1 in 6, 2 and 5. So it's about 8 more people.
Okay. And you guys have access to these slides, so you'll be able to look through what people put as their responses. And we'll spend just a little bit of time sharing a few ideas from our discussions. All right, I think that's mostly everybody back. So we asked you to elect a representative from your group. Can somebody from breakout room 1 tell me what were some of the ideas that came up in your discussion?
Sure. So we mentioned kind of that stereotypical scientist with the 1957 group, being kind of the nerd, the glasses, kind of geeking out, maybe an introvert by themselves. And then we said a lot of factors would come into if you would ask students now what they thought. It would change their opinion based on their home life, how old they are, what they're interested in, or what they experience, or their friends. Hopefully some would be different, but some would also be the same. And then we also got talking about not necessarily what a scientist would look like or what they think of, but what they think a scientist's job entails and what a scientist would do for a job or a career. So then we were discussing kind of that avenue of the question.
Yeah, so I'll give you, and you can see what other participants kind of wrote down as their notes, but thanks for sharing that, Amy. It was a lot of information there for us to work from. So this is what the responses from students, and there were 35,000 different responses that they looked at in this paper. And these were the predominant themes. So scientist is a man who wears a white coat and works in a laboratory, wears glasses. I was wondering if you guys looked ahead in the slides. No kidding. Surrounded by equipment, spends his days doing experiments, a whole lot of information. And in this paper, they also dissected it out into positive stereotypes and negative stereotypes. So here you can see the kind of introverted, has no other interests, no social life, no hobbies. And this is just a sampling of kind of those most prevalent themes. So what did students say today? So this is some work that I've done with my students here at UMR, first year biology students, and I ask them at the beginning of the term, based on what you know now, describe the types of people that do science, and if possible, refer to specific scientists and what that tells you about the types of people that do science. So here is the project I started in 2017, and I'm still doing it, and these are some typical responses that I get from students at the beginning of the term. Again, we see a person wearing blue scrubs and a white lab coat doing experiments with chemicals. Smart intellectually, but may not have the best social skills. Science is not something that everyone can go into. And some of those names that they mentioned, Albert Einstein, as I saw a couple of groups picked out. And again, the most frequently named scientists overwhelmingly at the beginning of a semester for these first year undergraduate students, Albert Einstein, Charles Darwin, Isaac Newton. So these stereotypes that we hold are very persistent. And although we think about the changing demographics in our country, think about the changing workforce around us, you ask somebody what a scientist looks like and what they do, and those stereotypes are still widely held. Now, I'm going to take a backtrack just for a second. I plopped in the chart about language that I'm going to be using today and where we are as a group, our familiarity. So you guys are very familiar with growth mindset, achievement gap, classroom climate, and a little bit less familiar with things like marginalized identities, stereotype threat, and inclusive pedagogies. And that's exactly why we're here today, or exactly where we're going to spend most of our time talking about those things. So let me go back and find where we are. So we talked about how when students think about scientists, they think about, these stereotypical white male individuals doing particular tasks, roles, having particular personality attributes, and that science isn't for everyone. So another question I asked them is if they feel they can relate to a scientist. And these are some examples from what we would call our underrepresented students, so students who identify with historically marginalized populations. So this student is an Asian female, and she says, I hear mainly about scientists that are male, so I can't relate. And even if we're talking about females, they're not Asian females like I am. Another student says, there aren't really many Black women doing science that I can relate to, and it doesn't fit my background as a first-generation college student from an immigrant family. So all of this contributes to a representation gap where students who have diverse identities don't see themselves represented in role models in these STEM fields, okay? And so we still see this disproportionate representation with who is in these professions, and that's something we actively want to change. So all of this contributes to something known as stereotype threat, where a person's identity is part of a negatively stereotyped group, and that causes students who hold those identities stress, and it can actually impact their motivation and their persistence in things like STEM fields. Right? And this can happen in a variety of subtle cues, and it matters a lot when students are caring about their performance and they're doing challenging work. So AP classwork, things that are new to them, things that are not familiar with maybe their cultural experiences or their past academic work. So we know also that learning about a discipline, a STEM area, is not just about that content information, but it's also about a student's identity and sense of belonging in that area. So all of these things, the lack of representation in the field, it actually extends to textbooks and representations of scientists and STEM professionals that are used as examples in textbooks. All of these things contribute to students feeling like they don't belong. Okay, and so a large body of research has actually shown us that if we incorporate things that can encourage science identity for these students and for all students, that can help them identify with these areas that we want to encourage them to go into. Okay, and I'm linking a resource that I'm going to use kind of as a STEM resource throughout. One of the articles that I have cited also as additional resources is a really great one. If you're ever trying to just get a lay of, it's really like a call to action for why we should be thinking about making our classrooms and these learning experiences, whatever they are, inclusive. Doesn't matter if you're teaching a civics class, a chemistry class, a music class. So this author Armstrong argues that classrooms are social environments, and because all social environments are places where inclusivity can happen or can fail to happen. So if you have students sitting in front of you, you're interacting with a social group. And if you're interacting with a social group, you have a job to do to make sure that you're practicing inclusivity. So inclusivity in the learning spaces is something that we talk about as inclusive pedagogies. And when you boil that down, it just means that we're making intentional choices that encourage participation and facilitate achievement for all students. Now, our implicit biases come into this, right? Because we all come from a particular background. We have all been professionalized in certain ways. So we have adopted habits of interaction, modes of communicating, ways of disseminating information, ways of cueing participation. All of the choices that we make that shape our classrooms can encourage and discourage participation in ways that we might not even be thinking about. So when we're thinking about inclusive pedagogies, it's not really about one particular practice that we do or don't do, but rather it's a whole learning philosophy that will guide our practice in all things. So it's about being reflective in our teaching or in our interactions with other people, even with colleagues, community members, whoever it may be, being intentional and reflective about those things as much as we want our students to be reflective and intentional in their learning. So I am going to, again, the whole point here is that these practices should result in success for all students. So whenever we're thinking about trying to make our classrooms inclusive, usually the best practices that we're going to recommend, say to invite participation from many hands, many voices, that's going to be helping all of our students succeed and not just say those underrepresented or historically marginalized students. So what I want to do, this resource that I keep on referencing, this Dewsbury and Brain 2019, it is a guide to helping develop inclusive pedagogies. And I don't want to walk through the whole thing, but rather I want to give it to you guys as a tool that you can use wherever sort of your interests are in these specific subcategories. They have these 5 major areas. So the developing self-awareness, developing empathy, which I think educators are fantastic at anyway, classroom culture, pedagogical choices, and leveraging networks. So classroom culture, I think you guys also indicated you were fairly familiar with, but this is what the experience is like in our classroom and how it feels to be a student or a participant in these spaces. And again, the choices that we make can impact how that classroom experience feels. So just a couple of things about classroom culture and pedagogical choices as sort of a focus for our time today, since we don't have time to spend across a lot of different areas. And again, I want this guide to be something you can come back to and use as is useful for you. So one of the things that I wanted to give you guys in terms of classroom climate, there's a lot of research that shows that actually very small actions by instructors can make huge difference in that classroom climate for students and how they feel welcomed and a valued part of communities. So this example is something that I use as a syllabus statement at the beginning of my semesters, regardless of the class that I'm teaching, the level of the students. I want to communicate to them, not only verbally, but also in writing and in classroom policy, that equity and inclusion is something that I value and that I hold them to interact respectfully, not only with me as their instructor, but also with each other. If it's in class discussion, small group work, online discussion forums, written work that they submit, all of those are places where I want them to practice this kind of civic, respectful interaction. So at the beginning of the semester, I talked to them about framing this as a community of learners where everybody has a place, everybody's voice is invited. And I do things like invite students to share out their perspectives in different ways. So I'll call on students. I make sure that I'm calling on students equitably. I give them a heads up when I'm going to call on them so they're not put on the spot. All of these things to ensure that they have opportunities to participate. But then I'm also respectful of the ways in which they are wanting to or not wanting to participate. And then I have this document that's linked out, and so grounding values that give them a more extensive view, and I'm hoping that this is jumping along with me as I switch tabs here. So this is just a statement that's modified from the University of Minnesota's Center for Equity and Diversity, and I have that attribution down at the bottom. So the approach and assumptions developed by the Office for Equity and Diversity. And this is just telling students that this is hard, ongoing work to act respectfully to all people and to be aware of different people's identities and backgrounds and how they want to be treated, or how respectful interaction looks to different people. And it's okay to mess up. It's okay to make mistakes. The important thing is that we're trying to do it, right? And so this is difficult. It's uncomfortable sometimes to talk to students about just student differences, right? That people don't perceive things the same way, particularly if we're talking about race or culture or different identities. But this gives you a place to speak from and give specific examples that really we want to try our best to act respectfully toward people, and that we will take action to make sure that everybody in the classroom feels included. So there is no magic wand. We don't have to fix everything immediately. And we need to continue to do this work and keep on trying. So this fits into the sphere of intercultural competence, or just understanding that we have to continually learn how to interact with different people throughout our lives. And it's not like we take one training on inclusivity and then we're done. We don't take one training on respectful interaction and then we're done, right? We have to keep practicing it throughout our lifetimes and in different contexts. So this is something that I refer back to in the semester if there's maybe a snippy interaction on a discussion forum, or if there's something that's said in class that doesn't feel good, then I remind us of our grounding values, and that part of our job as learners is to continue to learn to interact with each other. So it's just one example of kind of a ground setting at the beginning of the semester, and I'd like to give you one more example that comes from some published research that I'll link at the end of our session as well. And this one has to do more with setting a classroom culture of a growth mindset. And this comes from Elizabeth Koenig, and I've got the citation at the end of the slides. And she did some research looking at how language about help seeking could impact students. And so this was a large scale experiment, and some of her students, she ended up putting in this language to the syllabus at the beginning of the course. And some students had a syllabus where some other generic language was put in about help seeking and office hours. So the part that was changed is the text in red. So I believe that every student can improve their skills, learn from their mistakes, and be successful in this course. And this is a direct invitation to come and seek out extra help outside of class. Her research found that the students who had this language as part of their ground setting at the beginning of the semester were more successful in these classes and had just greater outcomes overall. So the title of the paper is that STEM faculty who believe ability is fixed have larger racial achievement gaps and inspire less student motivation in their classes. So we've heard about that achievement gap, and this is a way that, you know, by very simple, explicit language, you can communicate to students that you think all of them have the ability to succeed and that you're there to help them. So I thought that that was pretty remarkable, just the addition of a bit of language and reminding students that you think that they are able to move along that spectrum actually cause significant outcomes. So these are just some examples of how you can craft an inclusive classroom climate with a few choices that you make. All right, I'm going to stop there for a second, and I realize in skipping between all of my windows that I haven't been looking at the chat. So I'm going to pause there and get the chat back up in my visual range and see if we have any questions or things that people wanted me to review, revisit, or talk about in a different way. Seeing no questions or hands, I'll give you guys another example, and this gets back to our title of what does a STEM professional look like? And so this has to do with a pedagogical intervention. There's quite a bit of research about this, and it's changing students' attitudes and perceptions about who does science and who belongs in science. So this is a Scientist Spotlight initiative. And the idea is this: by featuring counter-stereotypical STEM professionals, we actually can bolster students' sense of science identity and sense of belonging in the STEM culture and community. And like we said before, this enhanced sense of science identity can actually lead to persistence and success in STEM fields. So this is an intervention that has been kind of crowdsourced. Many different individuals have contributed to it. And I'll give you just an example of one of the stereotypical scientists who is highlighted. So the idea is that you assign these low stakes writing assignments throughout the semester and have students complete them outside of class time, so no additional instruction required, and you can give them some completion points for doing this. So there's an online database where you can look up individuals, and I'll just show you Agnes Day. And these are linked in the slides there. It should go right to the search that pulls her up. And you can search from different areas, different grade levels. So here's an example of a scientist that I use when we're talking about cancer cells. So this is a cancer researcher, and there are bio information areas. There are links to different videos and things like that. And if you were to download this for like an assignment to post to your students, this is what it would look like. So it has a video and some articles that the students can read. And then they have these prompts that they respond to. So interesting to you, what did you learn? What questions do you have? And then what did these resources tell you about the types of people that do science? Okay. So pretty low barrier of inclusion for instructors. And then I want to show you the result. I did this intervention in my class, and I was interested in knowing if this changed student attitudes. So remember those questions about who is a scientist, and then can I relate to a scientist? So I did those pre-questions, and I showed you some of the comments that students had made. And I also gathered that information about, do these students feel they can relate to a scientist? So I asked them again at the end of the semester, and the question was, does this assignment make a difference to students and their perceptions? And the answer was yes. And there's some other research that has repeated this in different student populations, so community college populations, diverse student populations. And the answer that we get, whether we do 4 assignments, 6 assignments, 10 assignments, the answer is resoundingly yes. And these numbers just tell you that the extent to which students report that they can personally relate to a scientist shifts significantly just as a result of, having 10 weeks of instruction, and we are including these examples of counter-stereotypical scientists. Okay, then I'll just give you a few samples of what the students have for their responses afterward. So beginning of the semester, they repeat, very stereotypical things that we've seen since 1957. They have this very boxed in idea of who does science, the kind of work that they do, back to in the lab with a test tube and a white lab coat. They don't have any fun, right? And at the end of the semester, they're saying things like, you know, people are coming from a wide range of identities. They're any gender, ethnicity, people who grew up rich, poor, or anything like that can do science. A variety of science that we looked at coming from different backgrounds. People who do science can be ordinary people. And let's see, some even with a sense of humor in that first student quote there. I thought that one was pretty interesting, that they find that students can, or that scientists can even have a sense of humor.
So Kelsey,
So,
we did have a couple questions about the survey and in the scale that was used in the chat. People are surprised and wondering. You have 5 as I don't know, and people are kind of conditioned to expect that to be in the middle. Is there an intentional reason why that's designed that way, or?
Yeah, so this research, I wanted to replicate the findings that had been published in other populations. So the first question I had was, do the results that I get correspond to the other researchers? And so this is the scale that they used, and I wanted to replicate everything, presenting it to students in the same way. When I did the statistics analysis on the back end, I actually looked at reordering the responses, and it didn't make any difference in the analysis how we put them.
Good to know, thanks.
Yeah. We also, let's see, are there, so you like the Scientist Spotlight resource. The other thing, this is the original resource. So Jeff Shinsky is a community college educator down in California, and he might pop in here just for the end of our session. I know he had another meeting. So he was going to join us when he was able. So the resources I wanted to point you guys to, so Scientist Spotlight Initiative is the one that I have used the most extensively and is the first one that I'm familiar with. But as this research on inclusive pedagogies is exploding, and just the success that we've had using these counter-stereotypical examples of scientists, and counter-stereotypical you can think of as any category is represented in the database. Hi, Jeff is here. And so here are some other resources that are similarly motivated. And so you can see we've got a description of the resources, and each one of these is a hyperlink. So if you're really interested in highlighting women scientists, there's 500 women scientists. If you're interested in queer scientists, 500 queer scientists. The Scientist Spotlights Initiative is there, and then Project Biodiversify. So all of these are were put together by Sissy Ballin, and she just published a paper about representation in textbooks, like I was mentioning earlier, that we still see this gap in the examples of scientists that are given in the textbooks and the materials that we are using to acquaint our students with the field. All right, so I wanted to wrap up sort of the presentation aspect and save our last bit of time here for further dialogue, discussion, questions, whatever we'd like to do for our last bit of time. And yeah, I just ran through a little bit of the results of the Scientist Spotlight in my classroom, and I invited Jeff here because he's actually done some really great longitudinal research looking at students' attitudes and to see if these shifts stick over time. So more persistent than just a one semester or one quarter. And it's good news. So are there questions? So Jeff, I guess maybe since I've just shown them an example, we use Agnes Day as an example of a scientist who I've spotlighted in my work. And I know that the Scientist Spotlight database is relatively new, but it's very exciting and pretty fast moving. I don't know if you wanted to add anything about the resources that are out there or for their ready use in kind of K-12 scenarios.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm just thrilled to be here. I feel like all the best things I've learned about teaching have been from K-12 teachers. And so I'm a college professor, but I feel like my aspiration is always to be like the wonderful and dedicated K-12 educators that I've had in my life and around me and as my mentors. So I have deep admiration for everything that you all are doing. Thank you for being a guiding light for my own pedagogy and my own aspirations as an educator. And yeah, I'm thrilled that right now, you know, as Kelsey probably told you, some of this work started out in higher education that we were doing with scientist spotlights, but I'm thrilled that now we're working with a group of about 20 high school educators right now to pilot scientist spotlights in their classes. And we're collecting evidence from them as well. And so we're engaging them as teacher researcher partners with us to kind of understand what's happening with the implementation of things like this in their classes. And then over the coming years, we hope to extend that to also work with middle school and potentially even elementary school teachers to figure out how we can adapt resources like this in those scenarios. And I'm equally as thrilled and excited to go on to those stages of the project. But yes, we do have the Scientist Spotlights website. And Kelsey, I don't know if did you show them the website or what it looks like, or you did? Okay, cool. So you know what you can
just
find there.
very briefly.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have about 150 resources on there to date, but they are constantly being updated. So almost weekly, you can find new stuff on there. And they are meant to be mostly ready to use, except that that's what we're working with our high school and middle school partners now to figure out how to best adapt these to those environments and to make sure that the content and the language is accessible to those students as well. And so we welcome your feedback on that, and we welcome your partnership. If you find something that is looks like a really promising, but it needs some work to make it adaptable to your class, we'd be open to hearing about that and helping to make that happen. If you're looking for subject areas to be covered that you couldn't quite find to quite match your content, we can also help with that. We might have some ideas in mind where we could provide some suggestions. And so please feel free to reach out to us through the contact information there, and we will absolutely get back to you. As you can see, there's also a link to submit spotlights, and we've been a bit surprised and delightfully overwhelmed by the response to that people have been really interested in submitting spotlights to us. And so I think in the last couple of weeks, we've had 70 submissions from professors and teachers across the country of submitting spotlights for individuals they wanted to see integrated into their curriculum. And we're overwhelmed to the extent that it takes us a while to process those. And so we can't get all those online immediately, but it's been thrilling to see that level of enthusiasm there. And yeah, I think that maybe just to summarize from my perspective, some of the outcomes and from what Kelsey was saying, that it's been really encouraging to see that when we've investigated curriculum supplements like this in many different contexts, we see the same results. And so whether it's in my community college classroom of really diverse range of student backgrounds and identities, or whether it's looking at high school classrooms, since we've had some evidence collected in high school classrooms now, or whether it's looking at, University of Minnesota or something which is a very different, context from my own, a large research university, predominantly white institution. Somewhat surprisingly, or maybe not, we see really the similar encouraging outcomes in all of these places. And so that's been really lovely to see, and seems to show that we have people desiring this kind of information and this kind of content from across many different avenues and contexts. So. So yeah, I'm really excited that you're all engaging in these workshops, and can't wait to hear your feedback on how this kind of stuff works in your context.
Yeah, and at UMR, we are starting more partnerships with area K-12 schools. So I know that we're going to start trying to get this together in the Dover, Iota, and Austin schools, and just because they have reached out and said that they're interested. And so if you're interested in partnering and doing something like this, you can also just contact me, and we can see if we might be able to continue some dialogue, see what might work out. So at the very least, I guess, kind of in summary, we have a whole lot of actionable resources, actionable ideas to make significant changes. And that's really the good news, and where I wanted to end out. When we started the session, it was kind of like, wow, there are still really persistent stereotypes about who does science, and there are still gaps in representation and in role models and achievement if we were to look at those marginalized identities in STEM fields. But the good news is that we can make a lot of headway by making some simple changes and some thoughtful choices in our classrooms. So I hope you leave feeling empowered and that you have some good information and resources to move ahead.
Thank you so much, Jeff and Kelsey. I just wanted to let everyone know that we will have this a recording of this webinar available, and also that you will receive within a week or so an evaluation, and so I'd encourage everyone to fill that out and return it. And I also wanted to give you a reminder, this is a series of webinars from the Minnesota State Centers of Excellence Teacher Training Institute. And so we do have our next one coming up is Virtual Career Exploration. That's on November 4th at noon to 1. And so please attend the whole series if you're able to. And then after that, we'll have Kelsey joining us again for another one. So I would encourage everyone to attend more of them. And I wanted to be sure and get all that information in before people started to log off, but there's still time if you'd like to ask Kelsey or Jeff any questions, as we've got a whole 7 minutes. So.
And you guys have the slide deck, and so I'm just showing you the resources that were referenced throughout are linked here, and the Dewsbury and Brom article is linked in the slides above to find that resource for inclusive pedagogies. But each of these, if you were intrigued particularly by some of the information that I was giving throughout the presentation, these are great additional reading for you. Again, the idea that no matter what you're teaching, no matter your context, if you're with a group of people, it's a social place where you can affect change. So that call to action from Armstrong, the growth mindset paper that has the text about, I believe that all students can improve their skills and knowledge in this class. The Scientist Spotlight research from Jeff, kind of documenting this change. And this paper from Kimberly Tanner, who's really also invested in the Scientist Spotlight initiative, giving you other examples for how you can cultivate an inclusive classroom climate to promote student engagement and equity. And then the growth mindset literature, when students believe that personal characteristics can be developed. So again, ideas that you guys are pretty familiar with in terms of the growth mindset literature, just to give you a little bit more information. There you go. Teachers have homework too, right? Learning never ends.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
So with the scientists, the Spotlight website, are the people that are on there available for like coming in, doing a virtual visit or a talk with classes? Is there any of that connected through that website?
So with the Scientist Spotlight initiative, I don't think that that's an aspect, and Jeff can correct me.
Okay.
But on other of these resources, that is a possibility. So I know, for example, I found a local scientist going through 500 women scientists. And so I found an individual who wanted to connect with my class talking about genetic counseling and genetics with undergraduate students. So I think probably some of these other resources would enable you to connect. And actually, let's see, so they have who we are, and then you can search for people across a geographical area or in a particular area, something like that. The other thing that I came across today when I was on the Scientist
Kelsey, I think you had an audio glitch here.
Yeah, my technology was being fun. At least it waited till the end of the session. So there you go. Skype a scientist. Thanks, Jeff. All right. Well, thank you all so much for spending some time with us today. Like I said, I love talking pedagogy, curriculum, student learning, all of that stuff. So if there are questions that you have now in the future, I am a resource. I would love to have follow-ups from any of you. And like Anthony said, there is another session with me in a couple of weeks, well, a month or so. So we might see you back here for another topic in a little bit. Stay warm. It snowed up here, Jeff, so we're all getting out our snow shovels and boots.
Oh my gosh. I don't know anything about that. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, so. Wow.
The joy of Zoom. We can connect with people from all over.
Well, thanks so much, everyone. Just another reminder to return the evaluation, please, when you receive it via email. And again, thanks so much, Kelsey and Jeff. And
see you later, everybody.
Thank you.